Let's talk about myredbook.com, Republican felon, rapist, solicitor of rape, sexual assaulter, solicitor of sexual assault, sex trafficker, solicitor of sex trafficking, assaulter, solicitor of assault, attacker, solicitor of attacking, 422 PC, death threat maker, stalker, solicitor of stalking, cyberstalker, solicitor of cyberstalking, wannabe black hat hacker, solicitor of black hat hacking, solicitor of murder, attempted murder, perjurer, suborner perjury, solicitor of perjury, briber, solicitor of bribery, blackmailer, solicitor of blackmail, extortionist, solicitor of extortion, kickback provider, solicitor of kickback providing, kickback receiver, solicitor of kickback receiving, terrorist, solicitor of terrorism, etc., etc. Greg Chappell, ex-mafia member, 2838 Concord Lane, Santa Clara, California, 95051, 408-500-7328, 408-500-7328. He's been going ballistic since my last video. So yeah, let's talk about him. Lots to talk about. Dude's got an ex-wife, supposedly. She divorced him in 2003, or tried to in 2003. She served him with divorce papers in 2003, somewhere in like the Roseville, California area. Her name is Robin Chapelsky, with the SKY added on the end. Again, Robin Chapelsky, R-O-B-Y-N. She lives in Sacramento, California. For some reason, there's some woman taking care of her, and they're not romantically involved or romantically linked. Anyway, myredbook.com, Republican felon, etc., ex-mafia member Greg Chappell refused to sign the divorce papers until 2018. You want to know why? Because he was waiting for a 401k to come through. Of course, he didn't include it in the divorce papers. He never told Robin Chapelsky about the 401k. It came from the company Jan Marini, which he supposedly worked for and was his last employer. Unless Jan Marini allowed employees to take home product with them, myredbook.com, Republican felon, etc., in keeping with his deceitful ways, felonious ways, probably stole upwards of $250,000 worth of product from Jan Marini over, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I have no idea, but upwards of $250,000 in product, unless Jan Marini allows their employees to take home product with them. Some of that product may be over at the home of myredbook.com Republican felon Steve Johnson. You know, Steve Johnson that lived in the country of Panama, supposedly, and that has a whole colony of feral cats at his condo in Panama that are fed by some, like, 13 or 15-year-old girl that he pays for STX when he's in Panama. Some of that product as well probably went to another friend of the myredbook.com Republican felon Chappell family, a guy by the name of Dave. Dave has sold one house as a realtor in his lifetime. But anyway, let's return to myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Greg Chappell. So Greg Chappell cannot see his wife, cannot talk to his wife, cannot have contact with his ex-wife, or his kids for that matter. The only way that myredbook.com Republican felon gets to communicate with his ex-wife is through the wife, or through the woman in Sacramento that is taking care of his ex-wife. Now, if you want to know more about that situation and you want to look up Robin Chapelsky, go to truepeoplesearch.com. TruePeoplesearch.com. You'll find her address. You'll find everything about her, including the name of the woman that is taking care of her. She, for some reason, relies on this woman, and they're not romantically linked or anything. And this woman pays for her rent, for her dental work, for her medical stuff, for everything. Wonder why that is. Mafia, 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 mafia. Let's think about this for a second, too. You know, the myredbook.com Republican felon doctor of myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Greg Chappell, Joseph Walters. Joseph Walters told myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Greg Chappell, that he doesn't have multiple sclerosis. That if anything, myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Greg Chappell has a bulging disc that is responsible for all of his problems. So yes, myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Greg Chappell is faking having multiple sclerosis, and myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Joseph Walters signed off on that, even though he doesn't think he has it. By the way, myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Joseph Walters is friends with myredbook.com Republican felon, pretending to be a doctor, is actually corrupt DOJ Ari Kriegsman. myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Joseph Walters asked myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Greg Chappell to ask me to be his patient so all three of them and others could pimp me out and, you know, do whatever they wanted to me. Let's return to that topic, shall we? So, myredbook.com Republican felon, etc., Greg Chappell, once upon a time, he drove right into a house. He lied to me and told me that he told the myredbook.com Republican felon popo, who are just criminals and felons, that he fell asleep at the wheel coming home from Sacramento after visiting his ex-wife in Sacramento. Gee, but she divorced him or tried to divorce him in 2003. So that story is a complete fabrication. He also almost drove into 7-Eleven in, or on the border of Santa Clara and Saratoga. Yeah, and his vehicle's not modified. He can bring in 4 grocery bags worth of groceries at a time that weigh between 30 and 60 pounds apiece, plus 2 watermelons that also weigh between 30 and 60 pounds apiece. He can slice them up until there's nothing left of them right after he puts the groceries and the watermelons down in the kitchen. He can get up and down stairs in 30 seconds or less, up less than 30 seconds, down less than 30 seconds. He never got the shots that are supposedly given for multiple sclerosis. Came up with a complete fabrication for that one too, and said that, you know, even though he worked as a stock person or whatever at the time, like when he would have originally qualified or whatever for programs, like he worked as a stock person for places like Target. He said he made too much money working as a stock person to qualify for programs like those advocated for by Montel Williams. I'm sorry, if you're working as a stock person at a place like Target, you qualify for programs advocated for by people like Montel Williams. There is no excuse to not get shots. In addition, he has not had any new lesions in something like 25 or 30 years. So, I mean, come on. And his myredbook.com Republican felon doctor, Joseph Walters, told him he doesn't have multiple sclerosis. Yeah, so he's just a straight-up liar in every respect. And especially to his ex-wife. And especially in regards to taking product from Jan Marini. I'm leaving off here.